Now then, you remember when we first started our study of the four-step, that we discovered that the four-step is directed toward 4 defects of character. There's nothing in the big book about sin, deadly or otherwise. That's a figment of the 12 and 12. It's got nothing to do with the big book. The 4 defects of character which are identified and pinpointed in the four-step are resentment, dishonesty, selfishness, and fear. And so, for want of a better way to characterize them, I call them the cardinal defects. And then when we got to the 10th step, remember what we found? There they were again. Same defects. Resentment, dishonesty, selfishness, and fear. And so now when we get to the 11th step, we would expect the big book to again be consistent, which it always is. And we wouldn't be surprised to find that it again is consistent. So what are we looking for? On page 86, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. We're looking back on the day. This is a review of what we did today. Did we or did we not stay on the path today? Were we, during the day, resentful? That's question number 1. Second question, were we selfish during the day? Third question, were we dishonest today? Fourth question, were we afraid? So we have resentment, selfishness, dishonesty, and fear. And we're looking back to see if these cropped up during the day. Because the next question is, do we owe an apology? And so you see what's happened here is that we have a duplication of our 4-step inquiry. What defects came up? The 5th question is, do we owe an apology, which is a 9th step inquiry. But of course it goes right back to the 10th step. In the 10th step we are told to make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. Now tonight when we look back on our day, we say, did I do that? Did I harm someone, and did I in fact make amends quickly? Or to the contrary, do I owe an apology? So again, we're double checking ourselves, see what we did today. Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? That's our 5th step, isn't it? We inventory in the 4th step, we admit to another person in the 5th step, we make amends in the 9th step. And here in the 11th step inventory, we're looking back during the day to see whether or not we in fact took care of business. I had a resentment crop up. Did I talk to somebody about it? In the 10th step, it tells me I'm to do that. I'm to inventory it, I'm to talk to somebody about it, and I'm to ask God to remove it. 4th step, 5th step, 7th step. If I've harmed anybody, I'm to make amends quickly. 9th step. I'm then to turn my thoughts resolutely to somebody I can help. 12th step. I'm looking back now to see if I did that. Now, if I owe an apology or if I kept something to myself that should have been discussed with another person at once, I have the opportunity now, perhaps, to correct that. Yes.
This matter of have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once?
Yes.
Is this just a matter of you making an apology or an amends to that person, or is it like you said? It's like the 5th step. The 5th step. Let's say it's not something that I was selfish or dishonest or resentful. In my 5th step, I would reveal that to a sponsor. I tell that to somebody, and that's part of the healing. That's part of the healing process. Maybe from there, I got to go to God. Is this thought of have I kept something to ourselves? Is it of that nature, where something I've done wrong, something beyond just an apology? Is it just talking about I'm apologizing? Because it seems like apology is the line before it. So it would seem.
You know something, David? I've been doing this a long, long time, but I keep telling everybody, every time I do it, I learn something new. I never thought of that.
Well, it would seem like you would be talking to your sponsor or confidant a lot, almost every day, unless you were...
I've always assumed that that was referring to the defects, but I know now that your question implies an answer which is different, and I'm convinced that you're probably on the right track. Whatever it is that's come up that should have been discussed, any fifth step matter, it doesn't have to be the defect. It could very clearly be something we did to harm somebody else.
Well, that's an immense kind of thing.
Yep, but we need to talk, we have to admit it first, don't we?
Right.
That's what we do in our fifth step before we get to 8 and 9. Now that's an excellent point.
So there would be then almost a daily contact with a sponsor or a confidant or somebody.
Sure.
Okay.
But then, you see, it doesn't have to be somebody that we formally have identified as a sponsor, although often it may be.
Okay.
We would hope that all of us have people in our circle of close friends in AA that we trust, that we're able to discuss matters with. And I know I certainly have. There are people that I have no qualms about going to with anything in my life. But that's an excellent point. Something has come up during the day which we should have discussed with another person, in other words, done a fifth step on, as David points out. We got to see here whether that happened, and we'd better take care of it if we can. Maybe better pick up the phone and call somebody, our sponsor or someone, and tell them about it. These things are like, they're termites. They get in us and they eat us alive, if we don't take care of them. Today was I kind and loving toward all. Well, now that goes directly to what we learned back on page 84 again. Notice down at the bottom of that last full paragraph, 5 lines up from the bottom of the page. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Now, this question on page 86 identifies what that means. It does not mean that we carry around an attitude of love or an attitude of tolerance. This question asks us today, was I kind and loving toward all? In other words, did I act with kindness and love? Because love which is not acted upon is like faith without works. It's dead. There's no love there unless it has to be expressed in some way. It has to be put into action. Same way with tolerance. It's not enough to say that in my secret heart of hearts I'm very tolerant of you. But that I act with tolerance. Because the act of tolerance is the act which solidifies the actual fact of tolerance. I'm not tolerant just thinking about it. I'm only tolerant if I act with tolerance. And so here, in this little nightly inventory, I'm asking myself today, did I act toward others with love? Was I kind toward others today? There's I don't know if I passed this on to you guys, but it's what I call being slick. And that may sound like something kind of slippery and stuff, but it's not. It's a way of remembering something for me, and I'll pass it on to you. I believe that our job each day is to be soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind. And you can put an I in there if you want. I don't know what it would be. Slick. Soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind. And when we do that, when we act toward other people that way, we have a tremendous impact upon our environment. We have a tremendous impact upon our milieu, the place where we live, the place where we work, and our families and our friends and our social gatherings. The person who is soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind will trigger the same kind of reaction in the people around them. I can tell you that, this is something some of you will be able to identify with. It's been a hard day at the office or at the hospital, and you're tired and you're kind of grouchy, and now you got to go home. And when you get home, the wife or the husband who's waiting here is going to be grouchy too, probably yell at you for a couple things. And the kids are going to scream and yell, and the dog's going to bite you, and the parrot's going to swear at you. And it's going to be altogether the terrible end to a rotten day. You know, it's a funny thing, if you make up your mind when you go home, you're going to walk in the door, soft-spoken, loving, considerate, and kind, changes the whole place. Changes everything. Which teaches us a great lesson. We really do have a hell of a lot to say about our own environment. Because our problems, we have now found out, are of our own making. That they arise out of ourselves. There were extreme examples of self-will run riot. Now we've been making decisions based on self all this time. Now we're going to change all of that. And this is asking us, today was I loving and kind toward all? Not those selected few favored ones who deserve it, but toward all. We have been making these kinds of decisions and rationalizations. We've been separating people out and putting them in categories all our lives. We're going to stop that now. If we make it our business to be kind and loving toward all, it's amazing what happens. Ooh, this is a great question. What could I have done better? During the day, looking back on my day, what could I have done better? And we already ran into stuff like that when we did our 4-step, remember? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? These are the same kinds of questions. Now here we find, what could I have done better? This question requires of us to give it some thought, and be a little bit creative, and be dead honest about it. And we write out the answer to that question, because we're looking for two things here. First of all, we certainly are looking to change our lives, but we are also looking to go to God with this and ask Him for help with it. That's the point. When I ask God to forgive me, I'm at the same time asking Him to show me how I can do better. And I'm saying, God, these are the things I did that I should have changed or I shouldn't have done. Please show me how to do better tomorrow. That's the key to forgiveness for us. We learned that back in the 4th step. What could I have done better? Was I thinking of myself most of the time? Well, if you remember now, everywhere through the big book, everywhere, we find the same thing over and over and over again. Selfishness, self-centeredness, self-pity. Was it selfish or not? Decisions based on self. Because Bill knew that this was the most damaging thing that we do, is to stay buried in self, because that blocks us off from God. We cannot have God in our lives and self ruling our lives at the same time. Go back to the 3rd step. What did we decide? Did we mean it or not? Did we in fact decide that hereafter God was going to be the director, He was to be the principal, we the agent, He to be the father, we the child? Did we mean it when we said our 3rd step prayer? I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. I am here, take me. No reservations. Did we mean it? And if we did, then we know how critically important it is to stay out of self. And here's the key question, because it is our thinking about ourselves which is the major indicia of being buried in self, isn't it? Was I thinking of myself most of the day? And if I have to say yes to that, then I know I got a problem. I know that today I was living buried in self. And yet, this is the most natural of human conditions, isn't it? Because we human beings are just naturally self-centered. It's the way we're built. Therefore, we've got things that we need to do every day to stay out of self. There are 3 things that we do that the Big Book has shown us to do. One, as we go through the day, we turn often to God and we say, God, what do you want me to do next? What's my next step to be? Thy will, not mine, be done. This is a conscious effort, an action on our part, which is an action of surrender, isn't it? And if we do that during the day, we're constantly reminding ourselves who's running the show. Second thing that we do that is an act of surrender to stay out of self is we meditate. In meditation, as we're going to talk about this next week, and we'll probably do some meditating together as well, because a lot of people have a little fear of it. When we meditate as a group, we find out very quickly that we can do it. But meditation is an act of surrender. God is there, and we're letting go to Him. We are agreeing with God that whatever it is He wants us to do, we're going to accept the answer. And we're asking Him to show us what He wants us to do. We are literally seeking directions from Him. And the other thing we do to stay out of self is working with others. Now, there are a lot of people that stay sober for long periods of time, even though they're not doing much else, because they do an awful lot of sponsoring, or they do a lot of service work. Without the other elements of recovery, it doesn't carry them forever, but it will keep people sober for a long time. The Big Book tells us that nothing will so much insure against the next drink as intensive work with other alcoholics. And this is something that we see examples of it around us all the time. Or were we thinking of what we could do for ourselves, for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? Now, it's a lead pipe cinch. If we answer that 10th question, yes, that's what I was doing, that all the rest of the questions will be negatives. If I spent my day looking to see what I could put back into the stream of life, rather than take to give, it's almost a dead certainty that all the other stuff will be just fine. Why? Because that's what we're here for. It's our purpose. And when we do that, we find that just about everything else in our life straightens out one way or another. Not always the way we want it or expect it, but nevertheless the way it's supposed to be. All right. So now we have answered these questions in writing. And we go on here in this paragraph. But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. And one would say, oh, well, sure, that's right, because we want to be able to sleep. We don't want to be all upset. That's not what the Big Book says. It says, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. You see, it's always consistent, isn't it? Everything goes back to that. And what I am doing consistent with my mission, which is to be of maximum service to God and the people about me? And anything that's not consistent with that, anything that blocks me off from that, I have to take care of it. I can't allow that to happen. And so this business of trying to go to sleep full of worry, remorse, or morbid reflection is something that would seriously hamper us in our ability to be helpful to others, and that we need to take care of. And of course, if we've got some kind of a worry on our minds, before we try to go to sleep, we need to write about it, and we need to take it to God and ask Him for help with it. And then finally, the last sentence on that paragraph, after making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Same thing we learned back in the 4th step. Sincerely sorry for what we've done, willing to let God take us on to better things. We will be forgiven. Now, this is the only place in the whole Big Book where we're instructed to ask for forgiveness. And yet this paragraph is simply ignored most of the time by most people. and we have meditation as well. So it's a three-legged stool. Each leg supports the other two legs. Without the inventory, prayer and meditation aren't nearly as effective. Then we have a little exercise that we do in the morning when we get up. We look at our day, we plan our day, we write out a little itinerary for our day to see what's on our plate to be done. Remember, the story used to be called Dr. Addict Alcoholic. I forget what they've renamed it. But one of the things that he wrote was that every day I do what's in front of me to be done, what's on my plate to be done today, and I leave the results up to God. And however it turns out, that's God's will for me. And this is pretty much the same thing, except that we're going to ask God to direct our thinking. We're going to ask Him to divest us of our selfishness and self-centeredness and dishonesty and our self-seeking motives. And that by asking Him for that, and that prayer is answered, by the way, puts us on a much higher thought plane when our thinking has the wrong motives and the wrong ideas erased from it. It also tells us something that's pretty interesting, that God gave us brains to use, and the implication is He evidently expects us to use them. This business of my best thinking got me here, balderdash. My worst thinking got me here. I don't think, don't drink, and go to meetings. Ever heard that? Don't think, don't drink, and go to meetings. That's a formula for utter disaster. Telling somebody who must think, don't think, is almost as bad as telling somebody who must drink, don't drink. The go to meetings part is okay, except that meetings don't keep us sober. When we stop going to meetings, most of us get drunk, okay, but that's not because we didn't go to meetings, it's because we quit working a program. Every time we go to a meeting, we're making a commitment to sobriety, aren't we? We're making a commitment to carrying the message, aren't we? If I'm not in a meeting, how do I carry the message unless I'm out standing on a street corner somewhere? In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we've tried this for a while. See, those are the whole instructions right there. Ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought or decision. Relax and take it easy. Don't struggle. That's it. The big book, of course, as we have found out in our many, many months together here on this book, is very, very dense. Probably the most dense writing you'll ever read. So we have to look at each word, each phrase, each sentence in order to see the meaning. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of a working part of the mind. That's the truth. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God. And of course, this is talking to the new person. It is not probable that we're going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Listen to this now. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. And one of the most important things we learn in here is that we can, in fact, trust our instincts. We can, in fact, trust our being inspired. That the mind has been playing tricks on us all our lives, that we know what's right and we have ignored it. We have not only ignored it, but we've broken from it. We've done exactly what we knew we shouldn't do. We rationalized our actions. We lied to ourselves. We lied to others. We've got good instincts. And when we got God on our side and we're seeking knowledge of His will for us, we get it. We get to live our lives on the plane of inspiration. And we can come to rely upon it. And so what if we make a mistake now and then? Look at the god-awful mess we made of our lives when we were trying to run life to suit ourselves. So this is something of immense importance, and it comes to us. We get to have it. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems, and we've done that. We ask especially for freedom from self-will. Remember now, going back to your third step prayer, the second paragraph, the second sentence in the third step prayer makes a major issue of it. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. And so here again we ask especially for freedom from self-will, and are careful to make no request for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped, we are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us waste a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. Well, now that last sentence is kind of a throwaway, isn't it? I'm not necessarily sure that it's easy to see why praying only for ourselves would not work. In fact, many times, a lot of us have been taught that that's what we are to do. And so these instructions in the big book may come as a bit of a shock. I guess the rationale here is pretty simple, though, if we think it through. Where do I get off telling God what He's supposed to do for me? Haven't I really, back there in the third step, said I'm turning my life and my will over to your care, to do with me and to build with me as you want? Isn't that what we did? And isn't that what surrender means? And so Bill kind of backed away from this one time in one of his writings. I'm not quite sure what he had in mind, but he said it'd be okay to pray for ourselves if we end the prayer by saying, if it be thy will. That sounds way too facile and easy to me. It's almost like, well, I better do this, God. Yeah, if it be your will. The idea here is that we keep our minds off of ourselves, our wants, needs, and desires, and keep them centered on what God wants us to do, and that's the purpose of prayer and meditation. And it is consistent with everything else we find in the big book. Results are nil until we let go absolutely. Those who cannot recover are those who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. So you see, there's consistency all the way through. Remember, the big book told us a little earlier on that though we might at this time be trying to set our lives in order, this is not an end in itself. That our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That's what we keep in mind. And that's where all of our future joy, happiness, and freedom comes from. You see, it is our heritage to be happy, joyous, and free. We get to have that, but it doesn't come for nothing. It comes because we work for it, because we have the right attitude toward what we're doing, because we continuously work the principles of this program in our lives. And most especially it comes because we have worked and self-sacrificed for other people. That's where it all boils down to. Keep in mind that none of us had much of a mission in life when we got here, except to survive somehow and grab as much pleasure as possible. We're born, lies a bitch, and we die, so what? Well, that's not true for us now. We have a purpose in life. We've got a mission. Bill called it our holy mission. To carry His word to others. And when we do that, we get to have a life beyond anything we could ever have imagined for ourselves, a life we could not purchase for $10 billion. We can only get it one way, and that's through constant practice of the 12 steps in our daily lives, through surrender and through honoring our responsibility to God, which is to carry His message to others. And so then it makes sense what this is talking about in terms of we don't pray for ourselves only. This other business here about if others will be helped, I've heard people rationalize that, and it'd be easy to ask for a Cadillac Escalade because we might want to take some other people to meetings. I don't think that's going to work too well. I used to see a Cadillac Escalade around the meetings. I haven't seen it for a while. It's funny how those things don't seem to last in the AA parking lots for very long. They don't fit too well with the drunkmobiles. There is one guy, however, at the bottom line who drives a Porsche, and he's been sober for 9 years now, I think. Some of you know him. Hell of a good guy. But he works at it every day. He carries the message. Okay, going on page 87. If circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. So you're going to find that all the way through the chapter to wives and the chapter to family afterward. This business of the family praying and meditating together. Remember, when this book was written, that was what they did, because then the families were a part of AA. They came to the meetings. They were there. They didn't have these closed meetings that we have now. You got people in your family, and you want them to come to meeting with you, and they walk in and say, "It's a closed meeting. You can't be here. Alcoholics only." Balderdash. That's a terrible thing. The reason we have the chapter to wives and the family afterward is precisely because the families were there. This is a family disease, and it's a terrible thing that we don't involve our families more, because the 12 steps are for everybody. We don't have any patent on them. We don't have an exclusive right to the steps. They're spiritual principles, universal spiritual principles that apply equally to every human being. We need to share them. If we belong to a religious denomination which requires a definite morning devotion, we attend to that also. If not members of religious bodies, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers which emphasize the principles we've been discussing. And there are many helpful books also. Suggestions about these may be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they offer. And by the way, that goes both ways. It's a two-way street. Believe me, you have much to offer in your church or your temple, your synagogue, or your cathedral. Much to offer. And there are people in that church who need you desperately. They need what you know. They need the 12 steps. As much as they may wish to be moral, as much as they may wish to be religiously comforted, they haven't learned how to put these principles to work in their lives. But we know how, because we have the 12 steps. It's a wonderful thing to be able to teach. That's why I wrote the 12 steps for Christians. Because we're able to back up all the steps with Christian quotations from the Bible, but we could more than half of those quotations come from the Old Testament. And if one were to read the Koran or the Torah, one would find the same thing. And if one were to read the Buddhist writings, one would find the same thing. Shintoism. It doesn't matter. Wherever human beings have concentrated on the on the Almighty, whatever they call them, or it. These principles have come flooding out. Going on down to the bottom of page 87, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. You see, here again is an action of surrender, isn't it? We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. And by the way, when we say the Lord's Prayer together tonight, and we say, "Thy will be done," please remember that we are not giving God permission. We're stating the fact that His will is going to be done whether we like it or not. It is a statement of fact. Thy will be done. We are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. Another admonition, another plea, get out of self to killer. Surrender and act with obedience. Find God, surrender to God, and be obedient to God. That's the whole ticket right there. It works, it really does. We alcoholics are undisciplined, so we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. And boy, oh boy, is that ever important. This question of discipline is really so basal to everything that we do. And if you find people who are suffering, who are living their lives in untreated alcoholism, you're going to find somebody who he never was or has ceased being disciplined and working the program. Discipline means every day we do what we're supposed to do. I asked my sponsors right at the beginning of my recovery, what does one day at a time mean? They said one day at a time means today I went to a meeting, today I prayed, today I meditated, today I took inventory, and today I helped another alcoholic. And they promised me that if I would do that every day, I would never drink again, that I would remain spiritually fit, that I would grow spiritually, and that I would have a life beyond anything I could ever imagine for myself, and they were right. That is the credo I have been following. They taught me right from the beginning, be disciplined and consistent in doing the work. You can never be wrong. And what happens then is we get into God's pocket and we stay there. And at that point we are impervious to the ravages of this dread disease. Can't touch us. The problem is removed. It's gone. It does not exist for us. And it stays that way so long as we stay spiritually fit. That's the truth of it. And there isn't any way to get there except through the 12 steps, as far as I know. I've watched people try all kinds of different things. I heard some blithering idiot last night talking about some kind of drug they were giving him. And he said that this drug cut his drinking by 3/4. But then he was only taking 75 milligrams, and his doctor, God bless his doctor, was going to boost him up to 800 milligrams. And then when I thought about that, I said, my God, he won't drink at all. He'd be dead. I've heard of every kind of nostrum, every kind of phony baloney stuff coming out of some prestigious organizations like the University of Miami, like the Rand Institute, like a number of big shot places. They're all saying they found a way to get us to drink socially. Balderdash, it never ever worked. They don't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for the real alcoholic. That's you and me. There are always a bunch of people wander in here because the judge said so. They find something they never had before. People love them, think they're wonderful. They never had that before. They stick around. They stick around for years and years and years and years. And they say, I never had to read the big book or work steps. And look at me. I just go to meetings and don't drink. And I've been around for 22 years. And all the newcomers say, wow, that's for me. That's what I want to do. I don't have to work those damn steps. Take that book away from me. All I have to do is go to meetings and not drink. They're welcome to be here. I wish they wouldn't spread their poison so deeply, though. There are a lot of people, you know, who are being pushed in front of buses just as we sit here right now because they're being told things that don't work. And it's so important for you and me to remember that we have a purpose, a mission, which is to carry this message and to do so truthfully and wherever we have an opportunity. And we never let anybody new slip away. We get with them and we help them, we share with them, and we encourage them and we teach them. When we do that, we're fulfilling our purpose in life, and we're helping them to recover and perhaps save their lives. But this is not all. There is action, more action. Faith without works is dead. Right out of the book of James, of course. The next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12, and that's what we'll be starting with next week. I want to thank you very much. And now we have a real treat in store for you. The world's most famous chipmunk is going to come up and do the chips for us.